Suzanne Ross. I am here with Jeremiah Alberg, the author of a new book using mimetic theory. It's called Beneath the Veil of the Strange Verses, Reading Scandalous Texts. And we are here at the Colloquium on Violence at Religion conference at the University of Northern Iowa this year. And Jay's book has been not creating scandal, but very good conversations. And I've happily read it once already, and am planning to read it many more times, actually. It's one of those texts that it's a personal transformative text. I think I was telling you this, that I was reading it as an intellectual exercise, thinking, well, I'm getting smarter, I'm learning stuff and whatever. And in the last few pages of the book, I realized this is about me. And it was, it's one of those moments in your life where you're finding out something you didn't know about yourself. And it's not always, it's often something you've been avoiding finding out. So, at any rate, I'll just introduce you just from the back of the book. Jeremiah Alberg, or Jay as he's known, is Professor of Philosophy and Religion and Associate Dean of the College of Liberal Arts at International Christian University in Tokyo. And he is also the Executive Secretary of the Colloquium on Violence and Religion. So thanks for traveling all this way to be with us in Northern Iowa and for joining us for this conversation about your book.
Thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure is all mine, and it's true. Jay, the concept of scandal is something that is a very key concept in mimetic theory, and it is also a word in the New Testament that's often difficult to understand. So I think before we get into the thesis of your book, I think it'd be good for us to just get out in the open. What do we mean by the word scandal? What does that mean?
I think it's good for the reader to begin with their everyday understanding of it, right? So the Watergate scandal, or whatever the latest Hollywood starlet, has done wrong that is making some sort of headlines. That's what we mean by scandal, and it's a pretty uniform meaning. We have it in French, we have it in German. It's pretty much. And interestingly enough, I come from Japan. They use the same word, scandal, when a politician or a celebrity does something wrong and gets caught at it. And so that's where we begin. And so when you think about scandals, one of the interesting things about it is that we really like them, and we're really embarrassed that we like them.
Yeah.
We're both really attracted to it, and we really don't want to hear about it. And so what interested me in this was this sort of doubled reaction, that we're so ambivalent about scandal. And you can't just, there are a few people who can just be scandal mongers or something like it, but most of us, we just have very, I want to know, no, I don't want to know, type reaction. So I think it's good to begin with that, and then where mimetic theory and René Girard's thought has really helped me is, interestingly enough, he says, what's underneath that really is rivalry. Yeah. And at first, that doesn't quite sound right, because I'm not in rivalry with Nixon or something. So what does he mean by that? But if you start thinking about rivalry, I think the way to make the connection is you realize you are both attracted to your rival and you don't like them. That's what, you're in rivalry with them. In other words, you want to be like them. You're both vying for the same position or vying for the same girl, but you don't like them because they're trying to take what you want. And so, again, that doubled relationship of both being somehow attracted, at least if you may not put it that I'm attracted to the person, but you want what they want. You want it, and in that sense, you want to be like them. And at the same time, you don't want to be like them because you don't want them to get the object that you're getting. So that notion of rivalry too, where you're locked in with another person in a both attraction and repulsion.
So would you say that my rival scandalizes me, that I'm scandalized by my rival because of that dual
Yes.
We're at, well, in mimetic theory, we talk about at the level of desire,
Right.
we're sharing the same desires.
Right.
We're actually inflaming one another's
Right.
desires,
Right.
which would be great for a friendship
Mhm.
or a lover. That's cool.
Right. Right.
But then something happens where, what? Why does that not stay at a friendship level? What happens that tips it? Why do I become a rival with you then?
Well, I think often enough, the beginning of that is because the object can't be shared.
Mm.
So in the case of another person, and even sometimes an object or a position, you know, which one of us is going to be the boss? Which one of us is
Sure.
going to be the next supervisor?
Right,
You know,
right.
it could be you, it could be me. It can't be both of us, right? So you get into these win-lose situations. What mimetic theory points out is often enough, though, even the object then begins to drop out.
Right.
And it just becomes you and I as rivals. Anything you do, I'm not going to like. And anything that I do. And we start to feed off of each other in a very negative way.
Yeah.
And so I think that situation, it's not, I wouldn't say that it's directly transferable to me and the object of the scandal, like the politician or the celebrity.
Right.
But there is a way in which the celebrity sort of makes a promise of a life that's better than mine.
Yes.
Right?
Right.
And so in one sense, I'm attracted to it. In another sense, I'm jealous because she has it or he has it and I do not.
Exactly right.
And so when that celebrity falls, there's a certain kind of happiness. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, you know. And so I think it goes into whether the rivalry is interpersonal in the workplace or in communities, and we head towards a scapegoating solution.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or the way we scapegoat publicly our celebrities and our,
Right.
our
Well,
public figures.
Yeah, I thought that was great. Early in the book, you say what drives a scandal is the secret thought, I could do it better.
Right.
You know, like if I was Lindsay Lohan, I would have handled that so much better
Right.
than she did.
Right.
And so there's this certain sense of how we build ourselves up
Yeah.
by that comparison.
Yeah, putting the other one down. Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's a wonderfully everyday experience and very complex at the same time.
Yeah,
Which is,
yeah, I think everyone knows about it, and yet it's puzzling. And so what I'm trying to do in the book, and that's, I really appreciate what you said, is it's meant to be transformative. You know,
Mhm.
the journey through the book, it's written for readers.
Mhm.
And what I mean by that is, in my own life, and then a lot of people, reading is just, it's a very important activity to me. And I would say, as a general principle, the way you read a book ends up being the way you read reality.
Hmm.
And so if we could learn to read in a new way, we might be able to learn to relate to each other in a different way. So my hope is that the book does have a practical end.
Yes, and something real happens.
Yeah.
Right, and as you say, and I think what was just intriguing to me that you describe the thesis of your book as not as revealing the rivalry and idolatry that underlies scandal, but then also, I mean, it's a twofold, in order to, right?
Right.
Uncover a way of forgiving the rivalry so that the scandal becomes a bridge
Right.
to deeper understanding. And I think, boy, I thought, you're going to redeem rivalry for me and scandal?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's like scapegoating, of course, is another big concept in mimetic theory, and it's easy to scapegoat scandal and be scandalized
Right,
by your
right.
own attraction to
Right,
the scandal.
right.
And what you've done in this book is do something that allows us to engage with our own being scandalized in a different way, which is really, really powerful. So let's try and move
Okay.
through that. So how can what do you mean by a text being scandalous? You don't mean the Star and the National Enquirer, do you?
Well, again, in a way I do, you
Yeah.
know, right? Because that's our everyday experience. I didn't analyze those kind of texts in this book because I think it helps to look at some of the more, how would I put it? Some of the more literate, you know, more literary texts in
Yes.
our tradition, because because they're ultimately more important in the way they form us.
Yes.
Okay, so the newspaper really, you know, what is less interesting than yesterday's newspaper, right? So in that sense, it does stay sort of on the surface, and I think we need to get beneath the surface, right? And that's sort of a theme in the book. And so I think one of the ways of doing that is by looking at the more literary texts. I know that they're a little bit more difficult for people, but I think the payoff then is that much larger.
Right.
And so what I mean by a scandalous text basically is this same sort of feeling of being attracted and repulsed by it. Often the author's trying to do that to you. The author's trying to draw you in and at the same time keep you out. And that can be a very a kind of fascinating experience. It's one of the reasons that we like to read, I think. You know,
Yeah. Is that why the author does that? To draw you towards him or her?
I think it depends on the author.
Yeah.
In other words, I think the reason Flannery O'Connor does it would be different from the reason Rousseau does it.
Okay.
You know.
Sure.
But certainly Rousseau is doing it as a way of trying to trap you into a rivalry with him as the author. Nietzsche, I think, in a sort of similar way.
Right.
So I think that it's scandalous in that it provokes in us this dual reaction.
Okay.
And then I think, and you'll notice it with these authors, they tend to people either tend to reject them, right? So I'm not going to read Nietzsche, you know,
Yeah.
he's anti-Christian, you know.
Yeah.
I'm not going to read Rousseau. I mean, he abandoned his children, you know, to the orphanage, you know, for whatever reason. So we just say, well, I'm not going to look at those people, or people really just kind of fall into them, you know. You know, so they kind of become Nietzschean, and that's not always been a good thing in our history. You know, I think they can have a real damaging effect on people. So our reading, I think, can also hurt us. So these two kind of reactions, and what I'm trying to say is, I think especially for the Christian, we can't just reject everything that's non-Christian or is even anti-Christian, because we're going to lose too much of our tradition. And so for me, the challenge was, can we learn from these people? Can they actually bring us deeper into the mystery of Christ, rather than being a block to it?
Really, we can't reject things that are deliberately trying to scandalize us? I mean, if and Jesus says, you know,
Right.
get behind me,
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
a stumbling block.
Right.
Talk some more about that, because that's our natural instinct, is to just
Right.
push it away.
Right. And I think, you know, in the same way in the Dante chapter where Dante has to close his eyes,
Yeah.
and Virgil even covers them up, that image, I think there are times where we have to turn away. I think that there are. But I think if that's the only possibility, the only strategy that you have for dealing either with a text or with reality, you're going to end up in your closet because there are just too many scandals.
Yeah, that's true. That's
And so
very
I
true.
think we need to develop, and you need to be prudent about what you can handle, what you can't handle. But I think you do need to develop, an adult Christian needs to develop a capacity not to be scandalous.
Right.
You know, and I think that's one of the things that Jesus, you know, it's always been the tradition, don't scandal the weak. But
Yes.
we shouldn't use that as an excuse to stay weak, right?
Exactly right.
So we want to grow in our faith to a point where you can read someone like Nietzsche and not simply not be scandalized, but, you know, I would even take it the next step and say, oh, this is in fact has revealed something to me more deeply about the mystery of Christ and the mystery of Revelation, things like that. And so that's the scandal becoming the paradox.
Ah, yes, okay. Wow, my mind's going in like 8 different directions right now, but, so that's can you connect that with the idea of forgiveness? Because, you know, the cross can be a scandal, and it's talked about that, and Paul talks about the cross as a scandal. But yet the heart of Christianity is the message of forgiveness, and that can be scandalous. So when you say to me, I need to forgive, or I need to look into, read Nietzsche in an attitude of respect or compassion or forgiveness, when I know the terrible things that have come out of that, that's asking me to do something very Christian, I think. Is it not?
Yes.
Yeah, so you have that, it's sort of like, it's not quite in the middle of the book, but it is a wonderful pivot point where you talk about the difference between scandals as setting up oppositions that can't be resolved, and paradoxes that, you'll say it better, but like embrace or live into the opposition, rather than engage in the rivalry that's there. So you say that interpretation, how we read the text, is the art of transforming scandals into paradoxes, and I put stars and underlined that. I was like, wish I could do that. So anyway, if you could talk about that a little more.
Okay, I think the place to start with is what you said about, Paul says in the letter to Corinthians that for the Jews, the cross is a scandal, and for the Gentiles, for the peoples, it's foolishness. But for those of us who are called, it's the wisdom of God. Okay, well, the thing about that statement is there are only Jews or Gentiles. There is no third group. So it means that all of us are experiencing the cross as a scandal, because I think for the foolishness for the Greeks is basically the same thing as scandal for the Jews. It's this sort of shocking, offensive, and yet strangely attractive. We had the panel on lynching, all these people gathering to see someone hung. There's something very compelling about this scene, of execution, and at the same time very repulsive. So that's this fundamental scandal, and all of us experience it that way. And yet, to those of us who are called, it becomes the wisdom of God. Well, how does that happen? How does this become the wisdom? And that's where I think there is a certain, I like to use the word hermeneutics, and it just means a way of reading. So a way of reading of the cross, that not the cross itself, but through the cross you read the text. Okay? Through the cross you read the text. It's the light of the cross that illuminates the text. And my most profound experience was with Rousseau, because that was the whole, doing all of his work. And what I saw in Rousseau was someone who could not forgive others, and really couldn't even allow himself to be forgiven. And of course I can't forgive the man, but if I bring back into his text this notion of forgiveness that he himself is sort of expelled from the text, then what I was finding was his thoughts started to make even more sense than I think he intended. And so, and I'd say the same thing about Nietzsche, that if you start to read Nietzsche carefully, I just do the one text, The Birth of Tragedy, what he's ultimately rejecting there is Christ. And if instead of just saying, okay, well, he's rejected Christ, I reject him, instead of just repeating that gesture, saying, no, I'm going to bring Christ back into this, then it begins to open up. The text begins to open up.
And so does your own heart and life, because if your rejection is, as we were saying, it's rivalry.
Right.
And if you're locked into rivalry, I think that's when Jesus says, beware of this being scandalized by me. It's beware entering into rivalry with me, the source of forgiveness and
I told a friend of mine recently, I've spent the greater part of my life in rivalry with Christ, and it's not a very good way to live.
No, it's not. And it's not, and I find that too, just at the personal level. The one that, you know, aggravates me the most that I'm in rivalry with, if I can step back and say, what is it that I feel like they're blocking me from? It's that block, and let it not, let me see that I'm probably doing the same thing to them or to someone else. It's very, I think that we become read by, our own lives get read by that way of interpreting, which I
Yeah,
think is what
exactly,
you're trying to
exactly.
move people to,
Exactly,
right? From
exactly.
text
Yeah.
to life. So I think, well, okay, so we've gone from text to real life. So I think that might be a good place to stop and encourage people to take up the wonderful transformative experience of reading this book, and then hopefully we can continue conversations with you
Great.
about it in the future. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.